The best song of every year in the 50s. Remember when that voice used to drift out of your old kitchen radio? Or when your parents would hum this other one while doing the dishes? Both of these tunes have one thing in common. They hold the story of an entire year inside their chords. Sometimes a single song can tell the whole tale of 365 days. Today, we're hopping in the time machine together, heading back to a decade that changed music forever, the 50s. We're gonna find out which song ruled every single year. Who knows, maybe one of them is still hiding in some dusty corner of your memory. 1950, Goodnight Irene by Gordon Jenkins and the Weavers. That voice floated in soft, almost worn out, repeating the same line like somebody saying goodbye a dozen times before finally walking out the door. And somehow that was enough to make it one of the very first monster hits of the decade. Even if your English wasn't perfect, you still got it. This was a farewell soaked in sadness, but also wrapped in love. The song showed up right on time because the world was still climbing out of the scars left by the war. In living rooms all across the country, people were talking, or not talking, about the ones who never came home, about everything that had changed, about empty chairs nobody knew how to name. And this record, without spelling any of it out, felt like it put its arms around every bit of that quiet heartache. I'll see you in my dreams. Gordon Jenkins and the Weavers took an old folk tune and turned it into the best-selling single of the year. But standing behind it was the ghost of Leadbelly, a man who'd known hard poverty, prison bars, and straight-up racism, and who'd sung this same melody years earlier with a voice that carried every mile after mile of rough road. Fun fact, there were actually folks in the States who tried to get the Weavers censored for being too progressive. Didn't matter. The song still slipped into every house night after night, through the radio, on brand new 45s, passed along by word of mouth. Some songs you can't even remember the first time you heard them. Goodnight Irene is one of those. Before we keep rolling, we'd love to know you a little better. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop it in the comments. Let's keep going. 1951, Too Young by Nat King Cole.
Too young.
In 1951, every grown-up in the country had the same line ready. You're too young to know what real love is. And almost like he'd heard it from his own folks, Nat King Cole sat down and wrote Too Young. That velvet voice of his, warm like a quilt on a winter night, said the exact opposite. Young love hurts just as bad, burns just as bright, and sticks with you forever. Pretty soon, the song blew up into one of the biggest romantic records anyone had ever heard. You couldn't turn on a radio from small-town diners to big city nightclubs without catching it, slow dancing under dim lights while the whole world seemed to hit pause.
They may recall.
We saw ourselves in those lyrics. Maybe your first crush, that shy glance across study hall, holding hands at the soda fountain, slipping a note folded into a tiny square into somebody's locker. And when the adults said, "This'll pass," deep down we answered them with Nat's song. Listen to it today. With some miles and gray hair on you, and everything feels different. You think about that love that felt way too early, and yet somehow it's still kicking around in some corner of your chest.
At all.
Nat King Cole, cool as ever, did something a lot of singers only dreamed of back then. He made every teenager in America feel heard, feel like somebody finally took them seriously. Smash that like button if you think 50s music beats most of what's on the radio these days. 1952, A Guy is a Guy by Doris Day.
Because a guy is a guy wherever he may be.
1952 was still buttoned-up shirts, starched dresses, and perfect side parts. But right in the middle of all that politeness, Doris Day showed up with a breezy little number that told the truth with a wink and a grin. A guy is a guy. The melody slid in easy, and her voice sounded like your funniest girlfriend spilling tea. Fellas are gonna be boys. Sooner or later, he's gonna try to steal a kiss, sneak a touch, fall head over heels, and screw the whole thing up.
Strange, but his manner was familiar.
Doris was already a movie star and a singing star, with that rare mix of sweetheart innocence and playful mischief that made everybody love her. Guys had crushes, girls wanted to be her best friend. She wasn't some untouchable diva, she was the cool neighbor you'd wave to on the sidewalk. And this time she had us laughing, just a little naughtier than usual. This record became her biggest hit of the early 50s, hitting #1 on every chart that mattered. Between cigarette ads and shiny new Chevys, you'd hear it sneak out of the radio and instantly put the whole house in a better mood. A Guy is a Guy caught America loosening its tie just a bit. Without ever saying anything shocking, it hinted that girls weren't nearly as clueless as some guys thought, that we knew exactly how you operated and we fell for you anyway. 1953, Vaya con Dios by Les Paul and Mary Ford.
Vaya con Dios, madame.
To every Spanish-speaking household, those three words already carried weight, and then Les Paul and Mary Ford turned them into a worldwide smash. In 1953, this became the biggest selling record of the year. The husband and wife duo sang it like the goodbye was happening between the two of them. His guitar and her voice blended into the smoothest, saddest, sweetest thing you ever heard.
Vaya con Dios, madame.
The lyrics are about parting ways while wishing nothing but the best for the other person. No blame, no big scene, just that tight throat feeling when somebody you love has to leave and there's nothing you can do. Folks leaving the farm for the city, young guys heading overseas for work, families splitting apart, this song rode shotgun through all of it, like a gentle hand on your shoulder. Funny thing, those three little words started showing up in letters and everyday goodbyes, a sweet but bittersweet way to say take care. Years later, you'd still hear somebody whisper it at a funeral, at the train station, or just hugging goodbye in the driveway. Because when you can't walk the road with them, at least you can ask somebody bigger to do it for you. 1954, Little Things Mean a Lot by Kitty Kallen.
Little things mean a lot.
In 1954, Kitty Kallen reminded us of something it takes most folks a lifetime to figure out. Little things mean a lot. She sang it like she was sitting across the kitchen table from you, warm and real, talking about everyday married life. No diamonds, no fancy trips, no grand gestures, just a kind word at the right moment, a surprise hug, blowing a kiss from the doorway. While magazines showed perfect families with perfect lawns like golf courses and smiles like toothpaste ads, this song zoomed in on what the camera never caught, the tiny stuff that keeps love alive after the lights go down. It was the slow dance king at every party and family get-together. Soon as those first notes hit, couples drifted to the floor to sway a little closer.
To rely on.
Listen years later, and the words hit different. After decades of bills, jobs, worries, and goodbyes, you realize it really was the small stuff that mattered most. How was your day? A hot plate on the table when you walked in beat, holding your hand in a hospital waiting room. Kitty Kallen took one simple truth and gave it the prettiest melody. Real love gets built in the almost invisible moments. The ones you barely notice until they're gone, and then the whole feels huge. What's your all-time favorite 50s song? Drop it in the comments. 1955, Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White by Perez Prado. 1955 brought trumpets, swinging hips, and a whole lot of Latin spice that got the entire planet dancing. Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White, in the hands of the one and only Perez Prado, became the monster hit of the year, even though it sounded nothing like the other big records at the time. The King of Mambo did the impossible. He took a tune with almost no lyrics and made wallflowers get up and move. That sassy trumpet intro hit, and good luck staying in your chair. A lot of folks forget, but in tons of countries, this record was the front door that let Latin music crash the mainstream airwaves for good. You heard it in swanky nightclubs and backyard barbecues alike, proving a good beat doesn't care how much money you make. Mambo was freedom, loose hips, close dancing, pure joy, bringing tropical heat to cold cities and sleepy towns. Perez Prado, with his famous Dilo Mambo shout, brought languages and cultures together. The song didn't need words, your body understood the assignment. Play even 10 seconds today and your shoulders start moving on their own. It's like those hot dance floor nights are still living somewhere in your bones, even if the knees complain a little louder now. 1956 Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis Presley. In 1956, the music world flipped upside down and nobody saw it coming. A kid in a sharp suit but with dangerous eyes and hips that made parents clutch their pearls walked in. Elvis Presley. Heartbreak Hotel was the record that shot him to the center of the universe. That spooky intro was already miles away from everything else on the radio, and then that voice showed up talking about a make-believe hotel down at the end of Lonely Street where every broken heart checks in. Loneliness turned into a cheap motel room with a blinking neon sign, and even though the song felt dark, it was built to keep you company. For a million teenagers, it was the first time anybody sang their pain raw and real. Elvis started stealing hearts left and right. Fun fact, a ton of now legendary musicians say this was the record that made them pick up a guitar for life. Houses were split right down the middle. Parents swore it wasn't even music. Kids would fight you to the death over it because they felt every single word. Perfect soundtrack for 3A. M staring at the ceiling, wondering why she hasn't called or why he left without a note. Listen today after life has put some miles on you, and it takes you straight back to that first electric jolt, the moment music stopped being background noise and became a hideout, a shared scream, a place to park your own busted heart for 3 minutes. 1957, Diana by Paul Anka.
I'm so young and you're so old. This might...
In 1957, one name was on every jukebox, every teen party, every slow dance: Diana. Nobody knew who the real Diana was. All we knew was some kid with a killer voice was crazy in love with her. And that kid was Paul Anka. The guy was barely 16 when he wrote what might be the purest teenage love song ever. He sang it with all the urgency only a teenager can have, that wild mix of shy and desperate that only hits at that age. Next thing anyone knew, the record exploded worldwide. It became one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade. In some places, it even outsold Elvis. Eventually, the true story came out. Paul had a crush on an older girl, basically an impossible love. Maybe that's why there's so much respect mixed with worship in his voice. He doesn't sound like a cocky guy. He sounds like a nervous boy finally getting the guts to say how he feels. When Diana came on at a dance, the whole room changed. Guys suddenly found the courage to walk across the gym floor, heart hammering, and ask that special girl to dance. Paul Anka didn't need fancy words. He just put music to that stomach drop feeling we've all had. The crush that makes your palms sweat, that feels bigger than the whole world, even if it only lived in a couple of stolen glances and one song you played until the needle wore out. Hit that subscribe button if you're a sucker for romantic classics like this one. 1958, Nel Blu di Pinto di Blu by Domenico Modugno. Soon as you hear that chorus, your brain lights up. Domenico Modugno took this Italian song and flew it around the planet, and the planet said, "Come on in." With its funny long title, it was about a guy dreaming he's flying through a sky painted blue. Not sad at all, actually the opposite. An invitation to take off, to leave the hard ground for a few minutes and soar on love and imagination. You might remember this. It won the very first Grammy Awards for both Record of the Year and Song of the Year. Huge for a song sung completely in Italian. It also won the San Remo Festival and became the calling card for Italian music everywhere. In Spanish-speaking countries, nobody cared about the language barrier. One word was enough, volare, and we claimed it as our own. People belted it at family parties, in bars with cheap wine and guitars, on summer night drives with the windows down. Even if you didn't know every word, you knew it was about freedom. 1959, The Battle of New Orleans by Johnny Horton. The decade's final #1 looked way, way back. In 1959, Johnny Horton took a dusty battle from the 1800s and turned it into the biggest song of the year. Telling the story like he was leaning over a backyard fence, swapping tales with the neighbors. It's about a ragtag bunch of American fighters, supposedly outmanned and outgunned, taking on the mighty British Army. But instead of sounding like a history lesson, it's pure fun. Almost like your grandpa exaggerating a fishing story to get a laugh.
We fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
That bouncy rhythm and Horton's half-spoken delivery made you see the whole thing play out like a movie in your head. Guys running, ducking, firing, all with a proud, cheeky grin. Even though it was super specific American history, it still shot to #1 and stayed there. Proof that people still loved a good yarn set to music, just like in the old cowboy and troubadour days.
They began to run it on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
As the world braced itself for the 60s and all the cultural earthquakes coming, the Battle of New Orleans closed out the 50s by reminding us where we came from. Maybe you didn't catch every historical detail, but you sure caught the foot-stomping beat, the sing-along chorus, and that big old feeling of, we showed 'em. And that's our ride through the 50s, folks. We'll leave a link down below to another playlist full of golden oldies if you want to keep the nostalgia train rolling. Catch you in the next one. See you around.